Folks, I'm one proud Bavarian and it finally happened. 11 years have passed since the release of Victoria 2 and finally Victoria 3 has been announced. The project that promises to take us all back into the Victorian era is led by none other than Martin Wiz Anwar, a man that has previously led Stellaris and stands for a living and breathing world, something that old and new fans of Grand Strategy will likely be extremely happy about. I know I am. In this video, I will be taking a look at the 4 design pillars that describe the vision of Victoria 3 and have been guiding lights for the development team. The first pillar is called National Gardening, so let's take a look at what Wiz has to say about the overall vision of what he wants to be important in Victoria 3.
One of the aims we had going into this game is that we didn't want war to be the main source of enjoyment, the main source of strategic and tactical decisions. War should not be driving the gameplay. This is not a map painter.
As you can see right there, this game does not aspire to be a map painter. Rather, it wants to be a society builder. This concept captures what the Victoria games have always been about, even all the way back in the first and the second game. Pops, so an adequate depiction of the population of the world, will make a return and be depicted to a greater degree than ever before. In the game, the world will roughly start with 1 billion total pops and at the end of the game go as high as around 2 billion. Pops will have income and expenses, seeing as they work and then want to spend the money they earn with it on goods that they need to be happy. Should they not be able to acquire the goods they need, their happiness will plummet, turmoil will be created, and more importantly, these pops will migrate away or try to tear down your carefully created society as they simply grow weary and unhappy of it. You will be able to influence the state of your pops in a great many ways, such as institutions that require a functioning bureaucracy to maintain, but will simply aid in keeping even the poorest of your population happy and well fed. Of course, you don't have to make your population happy and instead, should you so desire, let them grow weary and angry so that they one day overthrow the old order and then give you a new society without your old monarch. This sort of freedom of choice is extraordinary and exceedingly rare in a grand strategy game, as it means that there isn't necessarily a losing and a winning strategy. Being unable to supply your pops and in turn them being unhappy and overthrowing your society might be something that you consciously did so that they would rise up and give you whatever form of government you desire for this playthrough. Managing your domestic affairs will be more important than ever. Rather than just wanting pretty borders, you might want to push into foreign markets so that you can then fulfill a new need that arose with one of the classes of society. Or, for example, if the power of the old reactionary aristocrats has faded away to an excessive degree by liberalization of society and the masses are getting riled up about it, you might want to make constitutional changes to your society and give over at least some power, or you just wait it out until your aristocrats lose their heads. This interconnectivity of domestic politics gives you a huge variety of options and with that, a chance to truly form the society that you had in mind with this particular playthrough. The second pillar of the game is diplomatic eminence. Wiz already hinted at this in the earlier clip, but it is the desire of the dev team to properly connect diplomacy and warfare. In most grand strategy games, warfare is the only option to achieve various things such as gain land or gain tribute from an international adversary, but the explicit goal of Victoria 3 is it to give you the options to achieve anything you want on the international level through diplomacy and only require war if your diplomatic efforts truly failed. For example, for the first time in any grand strategy game, gunboat diplomacy actually plays a large role in international politics. I'm sure that we all remember various examples of it, such as the Americans knocking on Japan's door demanding that they open the country to trade. Historically, Macau, for example, was leased to the Portuguese amicably in 1557, but if you were, for example, the British Empire, you could pressure China into giving up Hong Kong simply by domineering and threatening them on the diplomatic playing field. Of course, should that fail, there is always war. Even then, expansion will without a doubt be a big part of Victoria 3, as the colonization of huge parts of the world played a massive role in this time period, but the game, much more than its predecessor, wants to ask the question of why nations even did this expansion to begin with. Taking land in these regions can, in Victoria 3, give you access to new markets, from which you can then extract the goods you need to feed, dress and house your population. So in the end, diplomacy and warfare in this game will always serve the goal of nation gardening. So a game like this that wants to be a society builder must interconnect any and all actions the player can take within the world. This is the very core of why Victoria 2 is so beloved. Many of Victoria 2's systems were fundamentally flawed and often broken, but the vision of a truly living world was what gave it its huge popularity. Victoria 3 strives to do the same, but even better. This is the third pillar. Everything is political. Much like stress ties together most of the mechanics within CK3, politics will tie together most of the mechanics within Victoria 3. Different from Victoria 2, you now have domestic interest groups rather than parties. These appeal to different sections of the population and have different goals. Both your government as well as the interest groups will be represented by actual characters, although it is uncertain how much these characters will be utilized. You can invite interest groups into your government and by fulfilling their agendas and meeting their traits, make them and the population that supports them happy. With time passing, however, these interest groups, their power, and the support within the population for them will change, but it depends greatly on how your society fares. Were you unable to supply your factories with the goods that they needed to produce something since you lacked the access to foreign markets? In that case, it is more than likely that the industrialists will likely withdraw their support of your government and, in the long term, even see their own power melt away, seeing as they can't really make any money off their industry. Are you underfunding your military? Well, the armed forces will certainly want to have a word with you. Whether you pass social or political reforms or you fulfilled the desires of the bourgeoisie, the genius of Victoria as a game subgenre of grand strategy has always been this interconnectivity, so let's hope that the sequel indeed takes it even further. The only thing that confuses me somewhat when it comes to internal politics is the complete omission of parties. We can see that there are elections and election results, but it is on a different level of abstraction that can without a doubt be immersion breaking. Nobody actually votes for intelligentsia or petite bourgeoisie. Whether this will actually impede enjoyment of the game remains to be seen, but I remain skeptical. I do think that another layer that depicts parties makes it so that there is more immersion going on, as you can actually associate with them rather than with the leader of some ominous intelligentsia. The fourth pillar of Victoria 3 is that it is an era of change. The Victorian era brought massive industrialization-based changes to the economy, the industry, and the very fabric of society. Old powers were ousted and new ones entered the grand game of attempting to shape the society they live in. The commoners, who were not at all a part of a monarchy's political process, would become the central part of it, and of course, nationalism brought uncertain times to the entire world. This, yet again, feeds into the idea of all parts being interconnected, and I can only hope that Victoria 3 has many different gameplay sections within it, much like Victoria 2 did. Victoria 2 was a totally different game at the start of its timeline compared to the end, where one crisis over a tiny area of land could lead to an entire world war. I would like to see these systems expanded in Victoria 3 so that 1836 truly feels different to 1936. With all this being said, there is of course much more to be said about Victoria 3, and Liana Hafer made an extraordinarily long list about what she has seen at a press event. I will go over these things, for example that each day now has 4 ticks instead of simply being 1 tick, effectively quadrupling the actual gameplay time of the game as if it was 400 years and not 100. I will also be talking about the great details that have already been revealed about POPs and other things such as the UI, for example, being heavily leaning into the lessons learned via Crusader Kings 3. Right there, you can see the well-known CK3 Issues tab, but in Victoria 3. However, all of this will be discussed in another video so that we can talk about whether these are good or bad additions to the game. Thank you for joining me. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you are interested in seeing the full coverage that I will be giving both Vicky 3 and CK3 during the next year. I have to tell you that this was an incredibly exciting PDXCon for me, because as an immersion and roleplay focused player, this is exactly what I wanted. For now, I would like to thank the members of the channel, namely the Barons, the Counts, and the Dukes. You're all wonderful. Later, Alligator.